This.
Jeffrey, you're letting your mind take over again.
Welcome to week 137 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We're back with a new week, new shirt, no eye patches, and a new mug. This Days of Our Lives mug that I got in Los Angeles, probably in the late 90s. Week 137 starts with Monday, March 9th, 1987, episode 664. Kelly takes Jeffrey to the Capwell cabin. Last time we saw this, I think it had been blown up by Kirk Cranston, so he must have polished it up. I feel like they may have a caretaker because a man with a gun shows up to challenge them, and when he finds out that it is Kelly Capwell by recognizing them from the papers, I guess, he steps back. So I guess he's like the caretaker. Mm-hmm. Jeffrey spends the day trying to leave. Kelly spends the day trying to make things homey by building a fire and making dinner and getting some champagne. Jeffrey ends up taking over the making of most of the dinner because he doesn't like the way Kelly's doing it, which Kelly points out is par for the course with their relationship. After some amount of champagne, she tries to get him to remember what it was like when they were both in those sensory deprivation tanks, and they end up kissing. Mm-hmm. But Jeffrey breaks things off, saying that they have to face reality, and Kelly says, "You're letting your mind take over again." That was cute. Keith lets Gina sleep on the pull-out couch, but she had higher hopes. She tries to have dinner with him, and he says, "Oh, I think there's a microwave in your room." And Keith finds her moving her stuff in and tries to reiterate that this is a short-term arrangement. I think it's interesting how Keith and Gina can have an episode where they're just doing comedy scenes, but they're also the bad guys in other storylines. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, they've got a really nice chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Cruz stops Ted from hitting Jake with some metal object, and Jake runs out of the Abernathy barn. Ted returns to the Capwell house and tells the family that he almost had Jake confessing until Cruz barged in. Keith tells Cruz he must get an official statement from Haley, and so she is brought in. Keith quickly homes in on Jake being the culprit, despite Haley's protestations. He insists on Cruz and Eden not being in the room when he questions Haley alone. Keith gives Cruz his warrant for Jake. Jake goes into Johnny's to cash a check and chats briefly with Gina. Keith tells Gina they're bringing Jake in. Ted comes in looking for Jake and tells Gina he doesn't want her around Haley. Gina says she doesn't think Haley should be around Ted in his current state. Gina is not convinced that Jake is guilty. I think she's only met him twice, but I guess she sees something in him. Maybe it's his muscles.
Yeah, you know that you're maybe going a little far in the wrong direction when Gina is the voice of reason. And I actually agreed with her that Ted's probably not the best person to be around Haley right now in his current state.
Mm-hmm. Jake, of course, does what everyone should in this case, sneaks into Haley's bedroom to ask her to help him. Haley gets scared and screams. Cruz and Ted burst in and wrestle Jake to the floor. During questioning, Jake says he went to a number of bars that night. He doesn't know if anyone can vouch for him, but he offers to take a lie detector test. Cruz tells Eden he's going to find Jake a good lawyer because he thinks Jake's being railroaded. Now, first thing I thought of is, I wonder if Julia is available to be Jake's lawyer. Eden realizes this will put them at odds with Ted. Mm-hmm. I think the family's going to split into two camps on this. Cece and Ted on one side, and I don't know where Sophia's going to fall.
Oh, kind of in the middle, probably trying to reason with everyone.
Yeah, Mason and Cece definitely in the pro Jake is guilty category, and of course Haley up with Ted and Haley on the other side. And that's it for our Monday episode.
We had a CC sighting.
We did. We saw Paul Burke on
Harry O.
Harry O. Yeah, that's fun. And of course, Henry Darrow's a regular on that show. He'll be Cruz's father someday. And there's someone we regularly see. I forget who. And just had the short credits with the rape crisis consultant and piano credits that we have seen lately. That is it for the Monday episode. And as we had to make some arrangements, we will be doing another episode immediately because we watched another one just before we recorded this, but it was pretty easy to keep it straight, mainly because the storylines didn't intersect that much. So we'll be back in about 20 seconds after I change my hair with episode 665 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
You do a microwave, don't you?
Yeah, I have a microwave, deluxe model at Brown's, too. Why don't you jump inside and get a tan?
File these papers. I want that witch out of my life as soon as possible. I don't care how you do it. I want the marriage dissolved by this week's end.
Dissolved, huh? Well, maybe I can throw some water on her and see if she melts.
Would you like to stay for lunch?
Well, what do you think, Dad?
Up to you, sonny boy.
Boy, you really know how to roll out the red carpet.
What happened to your foot? Did you finally get it caught in your mouth?
We are back!
Hello.
Welcome to episode 665 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. About an hour ago, we watched episode 665, which originally aired Tuesday, March 10th, 1987. So I think we're fully into post-sweeps territory.
Yes.
CC wakes up Mason and Victoria early in the morning to give them his papers to file for the divorce with Gina. And sometime during the episode, Mason files them. Victoria's not too... neither Mason or Victoria are too happy the way Cece's treating them. In fact, after Cece leaves, Mason asks Victoria if she was happy. Or how does it feel to be invisible? Because Cece didn't even say hello to Victoria when she came in.
Yeah, he just kind of comes barging in, and Mason actually stubs his toe at one point, and may have a broken toe all episode. So, yeah, it's a little bit unfriendly, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Mason makes a nice joke about the Wicked Witch being dissolved regarding the divorce papers. I'll try and plunk in that quote after this episode. Cece and Sophia tell Eden they don't want to rush into a wedding until Kelly is completely in the clear, which disappoints Eden. Victoria sees Eden looking through some wedding albums and tells Eden about a couple she knew in L.A. that was engaged for so long their friends had to throw them a wedding, which I think is putting some ideas in Eden's head. Cruz shows up at the beach house with some clothes for him and Eden to change into. She asks if they're going to visit another garbage pile. So I'm not sure what that is about. Cruz asks Julia to defend Jake. She listens as Jake tells his version of events, and he remembers a bag lady talking to him after he fell in the street. Cruz looks for the bag lady with plaid pants and I think it was a Dodgers cap. Meanwhile, Jake takes a lie detector test, and Julia agrees to be his lawyer. Mason chides her for taking on another guilty man, although she reminds him that Gus Jackson was not guilty.
And I thought that was a really appropriate conversation because in some ways this whole episode does rhyme with the one where Gus is arrested and things don't look good for him. Cruz has a feeling he's not guilty. And of course Julia becomes his lawyer and he gets off. We'll see if Jake gets off too.
I think this is just a memory of this being an ongoing pattern for the series. So people will like to have their familiar characters doing familiar things. So, at this point, Julia notices that Mason's limping and says, "What happened to your foot? Did you finally get it caught in your mouth?" And one more thing happened. Let's go back to Kelly and Jeffrey, stuck in the cabin because there's a storm wherever they are, which we don't see any evidence of it in the city. They argue about splitting up, and Kelly helps Jeffrey get checked into a motel room. and takes the opportunity to look at his ring again. It says, "To Jeffrey, love, PPC." She leaves and goes back to the Capwell mansion and demands to know why Jeffrey hates the Capwell so much, but no one has any idea. She says he particularly seems to have it in for Mason, and then pulls Mason aside, in front of the front door, in fact, and asks to see his ring. And it says, "To Mason, love, mother." And I guess things fall into place for Kelly, because she says, What was your mother's maiden name?" And Mason says, "Pepperidge." She says, "PPC. Oh my God." So, the inscriptions are slightly different, of course. One says "love, mother," and the other says "love, PPC." So, maybe it's not entirely clear that Jeffrey is Pamela's son at this point from this evidence, but it is clear that both rings came from Pamela, and I think at the very least Kelly knows that Jeffrey knows Pamela, and probably she doesn't know how things went in the divorce, because only Mason was alive at that point already, and but she must have some idea that Pamela's probably not too happy with Cece having been divorced by him. So, I don't know. Mason said was in touch with Pamela over the years, so I don't know if that was always just by phone or mail, or if any of the other Capwell kids would ever have met her.
I don't know. I mean, I think it was in maybe the first season where we did have a bit more mention of her, and he was trying to find her at one point. She was kind of AWOL in Santa Barbara. So that's really the last we've heard of her. I'm assuming this means we're going to meet her fairly soon, or at least at some point in this storyline. So
we will meet her in 1987. I can guarantee you that. But it's only March, and there are still almost 10 full months. So we'll see how long she holds out. And find out why she ended up cutting ties with Mason, if she is, in fact, the woman in England that Jeffrey chats with whenever he can. Clearly, she has access to a phone.
And what her relationship with Jeffrey is. We've been assuming he's perhaps Mason's half-brother, but we don't know.
That's true. It could be her husband. Oh, well, I guess he wouldn't be with Kelly if he was married. So there may be some other family members showing up before then. So we will see as people start trickling in surrounding Jeffrey. I think one might be showing up next week. And next week we will have our temporary recast of Brandon. So we'll talk about that actor, see if he went on to do anything. This will be his first role ever sometime this week. All right, that's it for episode 665. Lucky number 666 coming up after we watch the Wednesday episode, March 11th of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 666 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, March 11th, 1987. Cece shows up at Victoria and Mason's place to tell Mason to make sure Jake gets convicted and to see how the divorce filing is going. Victoria's starting to get worried about Cece's influence on her baby.
Yeah, he's not exactly being very welcoming of Victoria, and he's actually been pretty rude to her. So I can see where she's starting to think that maybe she would prefer not to have her future tied up with the Capwell family.
She overhears him at the next table at the Orient Express trying to strong-arm someone from the DA's office to have Kelly and Jeffrey's charges dropped. Mason tells Victoria he doesn't want people knowing she's pregnant just yet, obviously, so that he could plausibly claim to be the father. I imagine that'll work for a while. Eden goes undercover at the soup kitchen, where she finds Dottie, who remembers Jake tripping on the curb and sharing a bottle of gin with her. So I think as a viewer now we know for sure Jake is innocent. She agrees to talk to Cruz in exchange for a hot bath. But when she realizes Cruz is a police officer, because he's got one of his little certificates on the wall, she runs. And Cruz finds out from a friend of hers that she's planning to leave town. Julia is thinking of buying a house a couple of doors down from Cruz and Eden. But the realtor lets slip that Julia is pregnant. She feels guilty about not... What? That can't be right. This is about Victoria, not Julia. So let me just add that to the previous thing. Victoria feels guilty about not being able to have sex with Mason until the baby's born, but Mason says he's fine with whatever's best for the baby. All right, let's move this back to the Julia one. Julia shows Haley the results of Jake's polygraph test. Ted is angry with Julia for defending Jake. Julia trips on the Capwell steps. And Mason finds it odd that Cruz and Eden are so worried about her. Because, of course, he does not know she's pregnant. I feel like some of these little slips are a clue that somehow Mason might find out accidentally at some point. Mason is still wearing one runner on one of his feet, so that stubbed toe may have been a way to cover for an actual injury for the actor, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Ted suggests to Haley that perhaps she knew it was Jake all along. Haley says, "You think it was my fault I was raped?" And Ted says, "Well, you had been hanging out at the stables a lot. Did you do something with Jake?" Haley slaps him and tells him to get out.
Ted just making things worse and worse between him and Haley.
I feel like there's no way to come back from that with them.
Yeah.
I feel like this may be the end of Ted and Haley as a couple. And, maybe the start of Haley and Jake.
I know. If Jake is exonerated, they could go off together.
Yep. Now we'll leave Ted alone. Are there any singles for him?
Well, Lakin must be getting divorced soon, I would think.
Yeah, and there's the two girls next door, Jane and Alice. So that's a potential. Warren has forgotten Lionel's birthday. Augusta phones to wish him a happy birthday. We don't hear Augusta, of course. But once again, reiterating, Augusta seems to be just fine in another town. We have no idea why she left that fateful day. Lionel gets an invitation to dinner at the Orient Express. And he is convinced it's from Augusta. Whereas the first thing I thought is, that sounds like something Carolyn might do. Warren goes to the Orient Express and discovers that the invitation is from Carolyn, but she says, "Oh, don't spoil my surprise." So he doesn't tell Lionel. Lionel shows up while Carolyn happens to be away from the table and sees the champagne, which is the perfect champagne, so he knows for sure that it's Augusta who's lured him to this restaurant. He is disappointed to discover it is actually Carolyn. I don't know. Being written kind of goofy, I think.
Yeah, it's an odd episode in that way.
Don't think Augusta's coming back, so this obsession with Augusta and talking to her on the phone is a bit odd. I don't know how that's going to play out. That's it for our Wednesday episode.
Now, we actually had a double CC sighting.
Yes, by accident.
Yes.
We'd finished watching something, and I was trying to find a channel that wasn't annoying to just leave the TV on while I was doing something else, and I put it on Fantasy Island, and I saw Paul Burke. I thought, oh, that's interesting. There's Paul Burke, and who is he talking to? Peter Mark Richmond. So CC number 2 and 3, I call them because I always count Lloyd Bochner. So that's fun because remember Peter Mark Richmond was in an episode of Switch with I think it was Charles Bateman. Mm-hmm. So anyway. The episode was almost over, so I might have to track down that Fantasy Island episode just for fun to watch it. We had our standard cast credits, and everything else was the same, and Sophia's name doesn't have the slash, so I think that might be the permanent spelling. Dottie was played by Ernestine Merger. Realtor was played by, I've got Valerie Miller, but I assume it was Valerie Miller. And delivery person was Michael David Wright. I forget what he delivered. And guess what? We watched another episode while you were not looking. So we're going to do 2 in a row of these. So we'll be back in 20 seconds with episode 667. We'll see you then.
And Misha won't be blocking the TV this time.
I'll figure out how to place myself properly. See you in a few seconds. Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 667 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, March 12th, 1987. Cruz's snitch Sal, who we've seen before. They're kind of dressing him like a Miami Vice snitch, I think. Tells him that Dottie got on a bus to Las Vegas. Cruz goes to Keith to get authorization to follow Dottie, and guess what? Keith declines, saying, "Oh, I got more than enough to convict Jake." Cruz is annoyed with Keith, as always. Cruz goes above his head to get approval from the commissioner. Keith checks Gina into her latest cruddy motel, and it's across the hall from Jeffrey's cruddy hotel room. Gina says, "This looks just like my old hotel room." Keith says, "No, it's nothing like it. I mean, the lamps are the same." I assume that's a joke because the prop department used the same lamps, or maybe a writer had the forethought to tell the prop people to put those same lamps in there. It's got a completely different layout, but that's kind of funny.
Yeah, I actually almost wondered if this was an improv line.
Yeah, which really sells it up, quite frankly. Keith's secretary, Irene, has quit. And the note she leaves and the message she left Cruz and Eden to tell Keith seems to imply they may have had some kind of a relationship, and that the fact that she's aware that he's with Gina is part of the reason she left.
Mm-hmm. And I was trying to remember if we had seen this secretary at all before.
We've seen her at least three times in the last couple weeks, and a couple months ago. Yeah. Well, her name was Irene a couple of months ago. I don't know if it was the same actress. I think it was, though. I'll have to look her up. I don't have her in my spreadsheet. Or do I? Why don't I look? Appearances. Irene? Is there an Irene in here? Nope. I got no Irene. So, my rule of only showing people who've had at least 2 appearances seems to have failed. Maybe Irene is unlucky enough to have never aired on a day when they were doing the little extra people in the credits, and so she would be missing from IMDb for that same reason, I think. Not the best option for someone who's a day player to get their credit on TV. Keith throws a fit when he finds out that Cruz went behind his back to the commissioner. Gina uses his tantrum in the next room to try and scare away all the other girls who've showed up to take Irene's place. And when Keith opens the door to start the hiring process, no one is there. And Gina says, "Well, I guess I'm your new girl Friday." But Keith does not want her as his secretary. He tells her, "Nope." But during his rant, he does say, "If anyone could get Cruz Castillo for me, I would give them anything." And Gina decides to use that. She contacts someone in the governor's office, I believe, or maybe the attorney general's office that she knows from a time that she met him at one of Cece's parties. And in fact, I think Gina says that she introduced him to his now wife at that party or something. Anyway, at the time he had said, or no, maybe it was Cece pulled some strings to get him a job. But anyway, at that time he had said to Gina, "I owe you one," and Gina calls him to collect, and it appears to work because Cruz gets sent to Montana somehow.
Now, I have to say, we were talking about how there were a few kind of dotty things in the last episode. This actually doesn't make much sense to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, Gina actually, we learned from her first iteration, has some pretty major secretarial skills. So she would actually be a good fit for this job. But it also didn't make sense for me, her using her pull to get this change made, for two reasons. First of all, actually taking Cruz off the case is going to screw Haley over. I think getting a good investigator off the case. I don't think that's in Haley's interests.
Yeah, Gina isn't really thinking that through, is she?
And also...
Plus, also Gina was on Jake's side.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So that doesn't make much sense. Also, if she had all this pull with the commissioner, why is she so desperate? Why isn't she using it for something, a little more substantial? Why hasn't she used it in the past?
And it doesn't make sense that, I guess Keith doesn't want Gina there for some reasons, but he's basically supporting her. If he gets her a job, paid with public money, that will at least alleviate some of her stress with him in that he's supporting her and keeping her, paying for her motel room. So, yeah, there's several reasons why Keith would want this. So
Yeah.
maybe he's just in a cruddy mood today.
Or maybe the writers are. I don't know.
Keith is so happy he hires her to be his new secretary. Gina receives the divorce papers and is incensed by the fact that they were filed in Belize. She seems to think she's owed some modicum of decorum and have them filed in the United States. I don't think it really matters. Cece obviously wants her out quick.
I think they kind of do a little bit of a disservice with this scene to Gina as well, because she makes a big point of never having heard of Belize, no idea where it is. And I think Gina's a more effective character when she's smart.
Yeah, I think that, I'd say this whole episode could have been done better.
Yeah.
Could have ended up in the same place slightly differently. It was fun to hear about Gina using her pole with that guy, but as you point out, it seems to be A, against her own interests, and B, a little bit of a waste. Victoria tells Mason that she is worried about what kind of influence Cece will have on the baby. She's still wearing the clothes that she picked out yesterday for this dinner that they're going to. She's been wearing them all day. When we saw her trying them on at the start of the last episode, or maybe it was the episode before, I assumed she was trying it on to make sure the baby bump doesn't show, but then she was going to put it away until she gets changed for the party later, but she's wearing it all day, so she's getting a lot of use out of that special outfit. Gina runs into Victoria at the Orient Express and says, the two Mrs. Capwells, and joins her. Then she starts going off on a long story about Cece and all the children he could have if he lived in Arabia, and she ends it with, even if they're not blood, he sinks his hooks into the children. This whole thing is just there to give Victoria more anxiety from the writing standpoint. But yeah, it's a good point, because Brandon is actually not blood related to Cece at all at this point. Eden picks Victoria's brain to get some more ideas about how to pull together this surprise wedding for Cece and Sophia. But Mason is annoyed when he realizes that she plans to leave Victoria out of the wedding party. Eden says, she's going to be a guest, so I think Mason wants a more prominent role for Victoria in this ceremony. So it's going to put a little tension between Eden and Mason, I guess. And I don't know if Cece and Sophia necessarily want Victoria in all their wedding photos.
Yeah, I actually found this plot a little bit odd too, because I just wasn't sure why Victoria would be considered an authority on planning this sort of thing. But if it's a goodwill gesture, it makes sense. But then to exclude her kind of undoes all that.
Because I think it was Cruz that said, I'm surprised you want to spend all this time with Victoria, and she says, I'm just trying to, to bring her into the family a bit for Mason. So, yeah, I don't know. Seems maybe a bit ham-fisted. Lionel tells Carolyn that he was expecting Augusta instead of her, and he's not ready to forgive her, if that's what you're thinking. Lionel calls Augusta, but a man answers him. Do we hear the man's voice? I think we do, right? He's got kind of a laid-back, low-key voice. Doesn't sound like he's a kidnapper. It's not the same guy Lionel had met, I guess, that time Augusta left. We find that out. I don't know if that was something anyone thought was a thing. But yeah, we really don't know what's going on. The man says, "Oh, I've heard about you. Only good things. I'll let Augusta know you called." So, yeah, I'm not sure where this is going with Lionel. Is this designed to, this bit of storyline designed to like seal off Augusta permanently for Lionel? If so, I don't know. It's kind of low key.
Or chase away Carolyn? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Carolyn's like floundering now as a character. You know, it's just not quite as bad off as Pearl, who we haven't seen for a long time. But I looked ahead to see what Pearl's appearances are like in the near future, and it's like, oh, he's in one episode, then he's in another one 10 episodes later, and then he's in one a few weeks later, and then he's on 2 or 3 times a week for over a year. So At some point in the next month, the writers have obviously got some storyline planned for Pearl. I'm like, holy cow, he's like back on the front burner and in constant view. I can only assume he's going to latch onto Julia a bit and help her with this pregnancy thing.
I don't know. I was sort of hoping he'd go psycho with Kelly taking up with Jeffrey, but...
yeah, well, I guess we'll see. It may start that way. But yeah, for over a year, he's going to be on the front burner. So we'll see exactly how Pearl gets repositioned as a character. And I honestly have no memory of anything that Pearl does from now until this last episode. So, we'll see. I feel like he may be hanging out with with Julia, because I don't think he'll be hanging out with Victoria. So
won't be hanging out with Courtney or his brother.
No,
we know
they're gone. Will he find out they've left town? I don't know. Will he try and go back with Alice after the Kelly thing flops? I don't know. We'll see. Looking forward to seeing between him and Jeffrey, saying, "Hey, Jeffrey, what happened? I was not expecting you to take over as Kelly's love interest." Kelly quizzes Mason about why Pamela left Santa Barbara and why she never came back. And where is she now? And Mason kind of gives us just a summary of everything we already know, basically. All he knows is that she spent time in Europe, but she doesn't know where. So I think Kelly's trying to figure out if she could be in England. Mason visits Jeffrey to tell him the charges against him have been dropped. He spots Mason's ring, which triggers him to start looking for his own ring, but he can't find it. Kelly visits Keith, demanding the charges against Jeffrey be dropped, and Jeffrey informs her that she's way behind the times. It's already been done. Mason's already gone over there to tell him. And he gives her a gift, the tape. I don't know if she'll want to review that tape. That'd be kind of traumatizing. Kelly goes back to Jeffrey's to tell him the good news and finds him searching frantically for his ring, so she hands it to him and says, "I know you're my brother." And he says, "Pamela Pepperidge Conrad is my mother, but Cece is not my father." So I guess Mr. Conrad is John Q. Conrad.
And he actually says that Mason is his brother. So we were right.
Yes, and Mason is my half-brother.
And we can still have a romance between Jeffrey
Exactly.
and Kelly.
Kelly seems kind of happy about that thought. So, I mean, he says, why would I, why were you full brother? Why would
I be seducing?
That's crazy. You nut.
It is.
Might have to dump you now.
Flowers in the attic.
Crazy. That's it for a Thursday episode. Ooh, Friday the 13th. That's 2 months in a row. We're having a Friday the 13th. Episode 668, so we'll probably record that tomorrow because I got to post this in 2 days. We will see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 668 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, March 13th, 1987. Eden hires Jeffrey to play piano at the surprise wedding that she's showing. She enlists Haley and Ted to help with the planning also. So I wonder when this wedding is going to take place. It's a Friday episode now, so will I wait till next Friday to have a nice cliffhanger maybe?
Well, are we still in sweeps?
No, we're in mid-March. So.
All right, so I'm not going to necessarily bet on a wedding actually happening.
You think it'll either get delayed or CCC and Sophia will say no, or someone will show up to stop the proceedings.
Someone will show up.
Julia moves into the house near Cruz and Eden's beach house. Mason brings her wind chimes as a housewarming gift, and she says Cruz is going to help her put up a wall to make a second bedroom. And then Mason says, "What do you need a second bedroom for?" And she quickly covers by saying, "Oh, I might make it into an office." Mr. Abernathy posts Jake's bail. We don't actually see him. We just find out.
That's nice of him.
Mason is told by Julia that that's what happened. Mason says he's filed an injunction to keep Jake away from Haley. Julia says she's going to file an injunction to keep the Capwells away from Jake. Ted arrives and tries to attack Jake. Mason thinks it was unsafe of Julia to give Jake her home address. Julia says, "I just bought a house on the beach next to Cruz and Eden. Help is just a blood-curdling scream away." Keith asks Jake to come to his office, and we never find out why. Gina does. She tries to eavesdrop at the door, but he opens it, pushes her out. So we're not sure if Keith had him sign something or had some scheme going or whatever. We never find out. We just see Keith come out and tell Gina to give Jake a cup of coffee, which she does. But as she's chatting with him, she accidentally causes him to spill his coffee all over his shirt, and she offers to rinse it off for him. So Mason arrives after Jake has taken off his shirt and handed it to Gina, just in time to make some snarky comments.
We do actually get a reference in this between Keith and Gina where he mentions, or he actually compliments her on her amazing typing skills. So that's a bit of a throwback to what we already knew about her as an accomplished secretary.
She does say at one point, Cruz thinks Jake is innocent, so, which kind of goes counter to the fact that she just sent him to Montana.
Yeah, that kind of, I guess, reinforces the point we were making yesterday.
Ted tries to talk Haley out of going to a therapist. He says, we should keep these things in the family.
Ted is getting less and less helpful with each episode. And again, makes it all about him. He's hurt because she won't talk to him about it. So therefore he doesn't really want her to talk to anyone who's professional. Yep.
Julia finds Haley, sullen on the beach and convinces her to talk to a therapist. Guess who shows up at Julia's house? It's Jake. And he's only there for one reason, because he wants to talk to Haley. Maybe he doesn't know about the restraining order yet. Maybe that's what Keith called him in to talk about. I don't know. But, that could jeopardize his bail if Mason decides to push that. It doesn't seem like either Julia or Haley really is going to tell anyone, though.
No. I think Haley, like Victoria, is actually getting less and less enamored with the Capwells with each episode.
Ted is upset when Haley tells him that she made the appointment. Keith resists Gina's advances. Then Gina finds a blank marriage certificate in Irene's desk and comes up with a plan. She starts plying him with champagne at the Orient Express, saying, it's so great watching you work. It's like working with Perry Mason. Once she gets him drunk enough, she says, remember I was supposed to remind you to sign these documents? And she gets him to sign a marriage license application. So she says, next stop will be the marriage itself. So she's planning to, I guess, drunkenly get Keith to marry her. Wacky hijinks. Should be funny. Jeffrey is offered a job as a lab assistant to Dr. Marcus, who's our recurring appearance by Michael Fairman, who is, of course, the gentleman at the university who helped Kelly and Jeffrey a week or two ago. Jeffrey thinks it's odd, not only that he's gotten the job, but he's getting $400 a week for it. And Dr. Marcus admits that he's actually only an assistant to the actual research professor, whose name is Dr. Nicholas. And Dr. Nicholas asks for Jeffrey by name. So Jeffrey thinks that Dr. Nicholas, that kind of sounds familiar. So he goes home and he starts looking through his photo album, and he finds a photo of Dr. Nicholas with his mother on the day of his graduation from medical school. So this is now the second time we've seen an actress portraying Pamela in a photograph. I don't know if it's the same actress. I don't recognize her. I don't know if it's the actress we'll eventually see someday as Pamela. There are no indications online of who might have been in those photos. But we get our first glimpse of Dr. Nicholas, who will be showing up next week, according to Dr. Marcus. He says he's still in Paris right now, but he'll be back next week to take over the project.
So this is a new wrinkle and perhaps a new character and a new branch in this storyline. It is interesting. I agree with Jeffrey. One of the things we see in this episode, it's actually emphasized, is the incredible musical ability he has. And remember, he actually, under an assumed name, got offered a position at the university. So it is interesting that he's being offered a lab position when his skill set obviously goes in another direction.
Now, it appears like he's not working at Johnny's, because he told Eden he was free, had nothing else to do. So I think the next step after the wedding is for her to offer him a piano playing job at the Orient Express.
Yeah.
Kelly visits Jeffrey to find out why exactly he hates Mason. She doesn't really get an answer, but Jeffrey says that Pamela is dead. She died a month before he came to Santa Barbara. Now, of course, we saw him talking to a woman that we feel is probably Pamela after that point. So, I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's not dead. So it'll be interesting to see why he said that she was. I have to say I really like this new, more assertive Kelly, because she's not really... She pushes back on him a lot throughout this episode.
She says, "Have you told Mason that his mother's dead?" And he says, "No, but I want to do it in my own time." So he begs her not to tell Mason, and eventually she agrees, as long as he doesn't hurt Mason. So he agrees to that.
With a lot of hesitation.
Because we don't know what his plan is.
No.
She says, "Thank you. I guess that wraps up our business." And he doesn't respond. So she shakes her head annoyed and walks away. So he's not being the potential boyfriend that she's hoping he is. And speaking of hoping to be someone's potential boyfriend, Pearl has shown up in this episode to help Julia move. And at the while they're moving boxes around, he starts to bring up the topic of Kelly and how he hasn't seen her yet. And of course, the verse is she hasn't sought him out yet either. and suspects that maybe her feelings towards him may have changed while she was in Europe. And Julia urges him to talk to Kelly. Kelly is so happy to see him, but then her face kind of falls when she realizes the conversation they're about to have. And she basically ends things by saying, I don't think we can be anything more than good friends. Is that such an awful thing? And they leave it with a hug.
Pearl is back in the friend zone.
Yep, where he really only wasn't just in his head, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the underlying premise of this, is that he never was out of the friend zone when it came to Kelly.
Yeah, so he's... I don't know what their plans are for Pearl, but we've got 3 single women now on the show. Julia, Alice and Jane, although Jane's dating Warren. Technically Carolyn, too, I guess. So, better snatch someone up before Dr. Nicholas comes in and starts dating some of the other single women on the show. That's it for this episode. This is actually a bunch of good stuff in this episode. And a bunch of things move forward. And I'm finally happy that Pearl and Kelly had their conversation. Now, will they ever seen together again? I have no idea. I mean, there's a world where if you watched this back in 1987, you might have thought, oh, Pearl could well be leaving the show after this episode, right? Because his goodbye to Kelly was more than Michael got, more than Lily got, more than
Courtney got. I mean,
Courtney
she got
got.
her goodbye, and then she came back, and now she's just not there. So more than Augusta got, actually, when you think about it.
We at least got some closure. Anyone who was shipping Pearl and Kelly at least got some closure with this conversation. So that's nice for them, anyway. Those who were shipping Nick Hartley and Kelly, on the other hand, are still bitter, probably.
Would that be you?
No, I think that one of the people we met on the cruise. I was still annoyed that they killed off Joe Perkins. I'm still annoyed that they recast Joe Perkins. So that's how far back my annoyance goes. That's it for week 137 of Santa Barbara. We'll be back for the Monday, March 16th episode. Week 138. We will see you in 2 weeks.
See you then.
Bye-bye.
I could get close to Jake and kind of feel him out.
Don't you mean feel him up?
I know how to push the buttons, and I know how to unbutton them.
Attorneys shouldn't go around giving out their home addresses.
I've just bought a house on the beach, and it's next to Cruise in Eden, so help is just a blood-curdling stream away.